Good evening. Keeps up the cash. Gary B, the casual comic guy here. As always, joining me on Thursday evening, the one, the only Digger Jim. How you doing tonight, buddy?
Doing good. Doing good.
And we have a couple tag-alongs. We have, you just saw him on the 10-1-1. We have Anachronic Comics Joe. How you doing, Joe?
Doing great, Gary. Thanks for having me back on your channel.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure. And then we have the ever-studious Matt Hoods.
Oh, am I online? Am I online right now? Holy smokes! I was reading Doug Bratton's one of his books here. Hey, thanks for telling me I was going to be on, Gary. Good to see you.
Right, thanks. Nice to see
I just randomly sitting in my house doing nothing, and then magic happened. Yeah,
Gary
Matt doesn't do anything without a camera on him, guys. He needs that much attention.
Gotta have the camera.
All right, and without further ado, our guest of the evening, the man with resting police face, Mr. Mark Andrews. How you doing tonight, Mark?
Evening. I'm getting warm already. Thanks very much, Gary.
Now,
I have
Mark,
my ice water ready to go.
right? As we like to do. Don't worry, we're not gonna Leslie Nielsen you. You won't be sweating like, like
I'm ready.
the Naked Gun.
Good show.
Give us a quick minute and a half. Who is Mark Andrews? What is it? What do you do in the hobby?
The real story this time, not the fake one. Come on.
Right.
I got to remember which one I've told. Okay, so
And then we'll say hi to the chat after.
I am just accidental comic book collector. That I'm retired. I've been collecting a lot of things for the last many years. As you may have noticed with the comment by Gary, I used to be a police officer for 32 years, and I am married with 38 years and two sons who are both very interested in the hobby of comic book collecting. So
Nice.
I'm really fortunate that I have my two boys are really interested in this collection that surrounds me, and we do a lot of stuff together. And my tastes in comic books is very eclectic. I have a lot of everything, and I got started a long time ago as a kid. So over the last 61 years, there's been a few things that have been added to the collection. How's that?
Just one or two, huh?
Couple.
All right. Well, let's get over to the chat, and then we're going to come back. And I hope you guys have your questions ready for Mark. I've got mine. But first, and beating Last Christmas this evening, we have Madam Blaster. Good evening, Stephanie. Nice to see you. Then we have James coming in. Cool second place. Hulk Collector Kevin. Nice to see you, Kevin. Jerry the Jitterbug, one of my favorite people ever. And we have Wellbore Brad. Nice to see you, sir. You know, I love that my chat is like equal parts Canadian and U.S. at this, at any given point. Case in point, Steve White. How you doing tonight, bud? Nice to see you. Then we have Tina, the best blue wrench in the business and one of the nicest people you could ever get to know.
Yeah.
And
she's up for a comic book community award as best supporter, a finalist.
There you go. Well, she already got my vote, so.
She may or may not get my vote. She hasn't earned it yet.
I'm waiting for whatever kind of stuff she can send me.
Matt's troll is in the chat this evening.
My good buddy Jackson.
Jackson, I saw you making a lot of comments about me 2 nights ago. Just want you to know I noticed them all.
Bruno's on his way there now. That's why he's not behind Joe. Paul, Psychedelic Comics, good to see you, sir. And
Hey,
let's
Paul.
see. Couching and Slouching with C Bizzle.
Hey,
Good evening.
Bizzle.
How you
Hey,
doing?
see Bizzle.
I know he hasn't been on a live with us in a bit. We got to get him back on.
You know, I have yet to be online with C Bizzle. The guy seems like an amazing dude, and one of these days, somebody's got to get me online with him.
We'll make it happen, man.
We'll make it happen.
I'm
Mr.
glad to
DJ
hear
Lewis,
this.
How you doing tonight, sir?
That was really
DJ?
subtle, Matt.
DJ
Right.
Wing Squad.
Chop and Drop, how you doing? Nice to see you, buddy.
Ah,
My brother.
I know, good to see Chop. And are we finally there? We'll keep just giving. Oh, Mr. Gore Vidal, another great guy. If you guys want to listen to somebody tell you a story, this guy has one of the best reading voices. You go to his channel, you'll be instantly captivated by anything he's telling you.
Right on.
He's a Pied Piper.
Did you get Kevin?
We are caught up for now. So without further ado, we're going to begin this thing. We're going to see if we can make Mark sweat a little bit. And, nothing to do with the Canadian wildfires, of course, but so Mark, a few basic questions to always start these, right? For anyone that hasn't seen you before and anyone that catches on the rewind that doesn't know you, you always got to start out with a few basics.
Sure.
So just as a little kid, man, what got you, what was your first experience with comics and what kind of got you into the hobby?
Well, my first experience with comics is at my grandmother's house. They had a full barber chair in the basement, and my dad would cut our hair, and all he would do is buzzer and went, and
Nice.
there were a few comics there to keep us entertained and not wanting to squirm too much. So Magnus Robot Fighter was one of the books sitting by the barbershop chair, and that's kind of where I got started. And then I'm the youngest of 5 kids, Gary. So yeah, so my oldest brother is 11 years my senior, and I'm, and so there's comics were in the house, and yeah, those things, Joe, Magnus Robot Fighter, those ones.
Whoa.
Was this the one?
It might have been, but I don't know what happened to that one.
Just randomly in reach. That's awesome,
right?
Joe.
I had a sneaking suspicion Joe would know what I might start talking about.
Yeah.
So that's kind of got my interest, but they were always in my house. And then when we would go to a family cottage on Lake Huron, that was actually owned by another family, but we were part of always going there every summer. If it was raining, there was a milk crate full of comics that you would sit in the bunk beds and you would read the, Classic Illustrated and the Munsters and Magnus Robot Fighter and, Man from U.N.C.L.E. and all those great TV style, and you just sit there and read them. There weren't that many superhero ones.
I'll say it wasn't necessarily Marvel or DC then. You were more the Gold Key and the Dell and that kind of stuff.
Yep. Well, and my dad was a teacher and my mom was a librarian. So I don't know if that was kind of, the Classic Illustrated slid in there.
Right.
Kind of.
Now, did everyone in your family, including your parents, were they comic readers?
No. I don't even really remember my oldest brother reading too many comics. Now, I do have one of my dad's comics when he was a kid. It's the Pirates, or I'm trying to think of the name. It's just left me, Joe.
Pirates of the Caribbean.
No, Terry and the Pirates.
Terry, I was going to just say that. Terry and the Pirates.
Yeah, Terry and the Pirates. So I have one of his, and he read that just prior to, just before. That was in the 30s. He was born in 29, so he was reading those kind of books.
Wow.
And so I have one of those, and it's just kind of grown from there. And I've never not been collecting. I've slowed down, but I've never not collected.
Right. Yeah.
So
Terry and the Pirates probably was a collection of the newspaper strips.
That was the thing. And comics really started to get me kind of interested in all sorts of history. And I think it was because it was Dell and Classic Illustrated and some of those other, especially some of the Dells kind of made me get interested in some of the history. And I'm a history nut. So it kind of expanded outside of comic books too.
Right on.
Now, I want to talk about the comic strips a second too, because when I was growing up, like whenever my dad had the paper, I wanted it after to hit all the dailies.
Yep.
And I had my favorites: the Spider-Man one, the Conan one, Hagar the Horrible, Beetle Bailey. Was that a big thing in your house, hitting the daily comic strips?
Oh yeah, yeah. And actually, not only just hitting the daily comic strips,
Mark,
and
you're not. You're muted, Mark.
I didn't touch anything.
No, I could hear him.
I can hear him perfect.
Me too.
It's
Can
on you, Gary.
Are
Gary, can you hear us? Gary muted himself. Or hit his speaker.
We don't need him. Let's keep
Is it
going.
my audio?
Yeah, we got this.
We'll talk about you, Gary, and you won't be able to know.
But
Let me tell him in the private
I
chat.
know.
See.
yeah. Hey, Mark, I got a good question for you.
Uh-oh. Guys,
First
if
off-
you all can hear Mark, let me know. I need to know if it's just me.
It is.
You can
It
hear
is
me?
too.
You guys
We
can.
But anyhow, Mark, hey,
Sure.
thank you for your service for 32 years of serving the great world that we live in. Because
Great,
I was going to
Mark.
say your
Standing
country, but
ovation.
oh, there we go. But anyhow, like you have one of the absolute best 60s TV show, random comic book collection. And I was looking at this one cool book, and I just want to know, do you have this book?
I have F Troop. I don't have the yellow one. I don't think. What number is that one?
I do believe it's number 1. It does
Oh,
not say on the outside, but I'm pretty sure it is.
I do not have number 1. I have and back then when I was getting those, Matt,
Yes.
there was I would just find them randomly because
Mhm.
those ones weren't there weren't people diving into the dollar bins or the $3 bins looking for Gold Key and Dell. They were looking for amazing
Right.
fantasy, and they were looking for DC books and looking for Marvel books, and and I like to that's my childhood. Watch it. Like I'm a kid of the 60s.
Yes.
So, and I was also the youngest of 5, and both my parents worked. And I'm not making any commentary on my mother and father's parenting skills because we were a handful, but the TV would get turned on sometimes.
Hey, by the time you have 5, the 5th
Yeah.
one, that's normal. But
It's not even a fair fight anymore, You
No.
gotta do it. You gotta use whatever you have. Now,
Exactly.
speaking of that, I found that one in the $2 bin.
Yeah.
nice, Jim.
Yeah. And
I
Jim,
was
that's
like-
where you find those.
Yeah,
And the
I couldn't
Howdy
believe it.
Doody books. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
It
cool.
was a 5 p.m. necessity.
Yeah.
5
Yeah.
p.m. every night you watch Howdy Doody.
Yeah. And then when you'd watch those shows like, the Time Tunnel, and you'd watch F Troop, and you'd watch Gilligan's Island, and you would watch, like the Flintstones, and you watch the Jetsons, and you watch name one, and then you'd find them as a comic book. And every time still today, if I find a nice copy of one or a reasonable copy of one, I'll go, hey, that's pretty cool. And
But now you look for them. But
Yeah.
when we were young, at least you'd go and you'd see other books, and these, you were right. On occasion, you would see one of these, and if
Yeah.
it was a show that you liked, you might pick it up.
Yep.
So I have a few that I showed the other night, right? Because I happened to see those shows.
Yeah.
A couple of them I picked up when I was a kid, but some of them picked up later on. I said, "Oh, here's an 18 one. This is pretty
Yeah.
cool."
So
You
for
know,
me,
Yeah, and the same thing. And even there was a show that I was on with Matt, and he asked me about Flipper,
yeah,
Yes.
and I got Flipper right over there in that box.
Yeah.
It's cool.
See,
Well,
we
I'll be
didn't-
on. Oh, go ahead, Jim.
No, I was just saying my mother was a big fan of like all those type of older shows. So we were exposed to that when I'm a decade further. So I'd be in the 70s range, I was a child of the 70s but she was like, you're going to watch the original Tarzan. You're going to, I want you to see Johnny Weissmuller. I want you to, do a comparison. And, so it was interesting that, you talk to some people and they're like, I don't know what the Man from Uncle is. I'm like, yeah, that was thrown at me. We had to watch that stuff.
Yeah.
She wouldn't let us
Yeah,
watch
so-
anything.
Your mother did it right, Jim, showing you that
Yeah,
kind of stuff.
Absolutely. And like Looney Tunes was a given, for all of us. Like sitting with my dad watching Looney Tunes and my brothers and my sister and laughing ourselves silly. And I don't think it warped us too bad because they were uncut back then. And we saw the hillbilly duel,
Yeah.
We saw
Yes.
that.
And yeah, I mean,
And I got
What a
the-
maroon.
Yeah, exactly. So
It took me years to understand the "what a maroon" line.
Yeah.
I was like, "What does he mean? What a maroon?" I don't even. I was like 20 some years old, and I'm driving down the road completely random, and I'm like, "What a maroon!" I just started laughing out loud. This lady next to me, in traffic at a red light, was thinking I was nuts. I just discovered why Bugs Bunny said that. Anyhow, hey, Mark, I've been looking to get you an AOK for a while. Now, I got one coming your way, but now I have to ask you, do you have any CGC slabs?
I do, but not very many.
You do? Okay.
But not very many. Actually, I have a new, I never had a magazine slab until at Fan Expo. Steve White and I were going through some of the things we bought, and he went, "Oh yeah, by the way," and he handed me an Erie book that was slabbed, and he said, "This doesn't fit my collection here." So Steve White gives me an AOK Erie slab.
Nice.
So
way to go, Steve.
Oh, Steve, that was awesome of him to do that. So,
Steve.
and but I have the ones I do have slabbed are not so much that I needed to do it because of the financial impact or the economic value. It's because they were some of the books I bought raw as a kid.
Right.
They're historic to me. I'm trying to preserve them. So I bet you I have less than maybe a dozen, less than 20 slab. And I have a collection that is not huge. It's about 58,000 books or so.
It's tiny.
Yeah.
Did you just say not huge?
Did you say 58,000 or 5,800? 5,800?
That's a lot of books. Holy cow.
58,000 is a house, bro. I mean, I'm confused.
It's more than 5,800. Anyway, there's a lot.
Wow.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
We hear you fine, Gary.
I had to get on my phone. Some storm rolled in and I can't get everything on the computer again.
That's what happened to me. That's what happened to me last night.
Expecting one
I think
here.
it took
too,
out my
if I just
internet.
Here, that's because of it.
Yeah. Anyway, so anyway, sorry, Jim. We got distracted there by some silly number. Anyway, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Boom.
And I've actually most of them are all they're all raw, and it's not because I'm like a purist and you can't slab them. It's just, and also the reality is for me to slab them, I have to ship them to the States.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
And so if you got,
I was always curious about that because you guys don't have any slabbing companies over there, right?
None. So you have to not only pay to have them, looked after by whatever grading company, you then have to pay for the shipping. You have to insure them. Then you have to make sure that and pray, because you have no control over it, that the customs people don't lose their minds and go, "Oh no, this isn't only worth, whatever. It's worth this, and now I'm paying import tax because the value of it has changed because it's slabbed."
I know that's bad.
And whenever I ship international, I always write gift on it.
Yes, and that's really cool. When I'm sending stuff to people outside the country, I always write gift because it always is But for me to do the slab with CGC or any of them, you can't say, "Well, it's a gift to myself," because they get really suspicious about that.
And Mark, that thing that I sent you, that it was sent back, it was accepted sending it out. So hopefully you'll get it in a couple of months.
Well, that would be cool. Maybe for Christmas, Joe. I'm all excited. Anyway, so remember we were talking about the the cartoons in the comic book, Gary?
Yeah, the newspaper strips.
Yeah. So because I'm a bit of a history fan and I do love the comic books and I love the stories and I love the art and all that stuff, but I also like to know, I like some of the history. So I look for stuff like this.
Oh yeah, right on.
Oh wow,
nice.
So the creator of the Addams Family, and this one is you gotta love this one. Joe, you all may appreciate this. The forward in this one is written by Boris Karloff.
Nice.
Whoa,
Oh wow,
that's incredible.
Yeah. So this is 1940. So that's the guy who come up, because I was watching the Addams Family, and I've never found an Addams Family comic book.
Oh yeah, they got to be out
Oh,
there.
Well,
yeah.
there's monsters and there's everything else, but I never. And so when I saw this, and I know Joe talks about the comics he got for 2 cents.
Yeah.
This one was somebody cleaned out their cottage at the local township dump, and this was on the pile.
Oh, nice find then.
I know. So I kind of like that kind of stuff. It gives you an idea of the cool stuff. And the same thing with I'm always interested in the history and the humor. So I have this. I have different examples of this, right? So this one is 1883.
Wow.
And what's kind of cool, and because I always look for there's cartoons in here and there's stories and stuff and the humor, and it kind of goes back to the comic books about how the humor of them, because they called them funny books, right?
Right.
Right.
And what this one's just kind of cool. The last story on this one is by this guy by the name of Mark Twain. And the first line of before they get into the story is Mark Twain is in about 10 years has achieved compilation renown. So Mark Twain has only been around for 10 years when this was printed.
Nice.
That's crazy.
Yeah. So, but it's that kind of stuff that makes me look for the rare and the not rare, but unusual comics and the unusual stories and the unusual books and like what is out there. So
Now, are you a big horror collector? I mean, do you like the horror stuff?
oh yeah.
I don't know. I mean, I'm
When Steve White and I were there was one in 73. Who said
I
that?
think someone's got another window open because there's
Yeah, somebody's is playing it on something else. I can hear the feedback.
Is it Matt?
Now I got my speakers on so you can't hear it.
No. Second window open. Like they have the YouTube window open and they're in the studio.
yeah.
No, I don't.
I don't think.
Okay.
Okay, it's gone now.
Well, okay. I had your Instagram still open, Gary, but maybe that was it. Anyway, so when Steve White and I were at Fan Expo just the last 2 weekends ago, I was looking through the bins and stuff because I finished off 3 of my Bronze Age horror runs from Marvel.
Nice.
Wow.
So like when you ask me if I'm like the horror, I really like that old Bronze Age horror. I would love to have been in the bullpen when they were trying to think of the next name of the next monster.
Some of those names are so hilarious, right?
They are just a riot. Attack of Gloob, Gloob. Like
They couldn't use Blob because it's on the the movie theater.
It's been taken already. Yeah.
Right. Well, and some of them were just funny because some of them just read like, "Oh, we just need a monster for this book," and
yeah.
Mhm.
Okay, what are we gonna do? Or like the something coming up out of the graves, or who's made the bad deal, or
being a historian like you are with the horror comics and stuff. I'm kind of curious if anyone has any knowledge why every woman, for the most part, say 90% of them on those old horror covers always had a red dress on. Because you see them, and almost to a woman, it's a red dress, and if it's not red, then it's white to appear ghosty.
yeah. I don't know if it was because
And I don't know if it's just because they had limited color palette to use.
well for the 4 colors.
So
I think
talking with the horror, do you have a favorite horror cover from back then, Mark?
Oh, geez, there's so many cool covers. Even some of the current books, like some of the Marvel ones, like the. I don't want to know what that does to you. That glue pile. Some of those covers, like the Marvel Spotlight Headless Horseman cover, is like that cover. But then you go to some of the horror books. And it's gothic horror in the Classic Illustrated. like the Invisible Man, Frankenstein's monster. They were just really, really well done. Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde is one of my favorite because it has the Jekyll and a shadow just in behind. The Dell Dracula cover is just such a cool painted cover. For one of my least favorite is the Dell Wolfman, because I swear they must have been on a timeline, and just because it doesn't even have anything to do with the Wolfman, it's just disappointing. But the Creature from the Black Lagoon, it doesn't say Black Lagoon, it just says Creature. That's another, I love that cover. I love
that movie.
And the movie is awesome too. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the underwater photography in that movie for the time is so clear and so good.
Yeah.
And it had to be so dangerous for that guy to be in there.
Oh, can you imagine?
For sure.
Like, he's holding that pose really well. Well, that's because he's drowning. Like,
right. Exactly.
Exactly.
So you watch that movie now and you still wonder how they did it.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, it's well done. The 3D in that movie was amazing too. Yeah.
So now, were you a fan, Mark, of more of the drawn covers, or growing up were you a big fan of the photo covers, that actual from the movies and programs?
In all honesty, the painted and drawn covers, and it always would really amaze me because of artistic talent, that under timelines and under constraints, these guys are pumping out these covers for so many books. The photo covers are cool because you see your TV heroes, right? But it's a photo, and I know that takes a process, and I know that there's a setup and the lighting and everything to make us look good, and all that stuff. But the painted covers, really, I love seeing the painted covers. Like some of the covers back in the day that just were amazing. That you think, okay, like somebody sat with a watch going to get this cover done, to get it out, and then they're already looking at the next one. And some of them are amazing.
And I love the era of covers, especially, let's say, the Bronze Age, because it's my favorite. I just love that you can look at those covers, and there is as much to look at on those covers as there is to read inside. There's a whole story going on in the covers. And as beautiful as some of the art is today, it's a portrait picture, basically. Yeah, but it's not telling you anything about the inside of the book.
Well,
and it's a whole thing.
And I love some of the covers for sure, and the negative space and all that stuff. But I have noticed that about the hobby is a lot of the books are becoming that's why you have these variants, right? This interpretation and that interpretation, and it's really not about the story. And this is a shameless plug for Isolation. That's one of the reasons I love the covers of that series, is because it's about the story.
Right. It pertains exactly to what's going on inside the book.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you look at a cover of, I don't want to pick one, but I'll pick DC just because it's fun to pick on DC because Joe's listening. Anyway, I'm not gonna. You look at some of you do. It's portrait. It's beautiful art. There's some Wonder Woman and Poison Ivy and Superman and all that. They're amazing covers, but it's a portrait. It's space, and it's negative space and stuff. Some of them are cool. I know Tina's here, right?
Yes.
Okay. I'm not a huge fan of the shiny covers.
The foil?
Or Alex Ross timeless covers from Marvel, right?
Yeah, I love the Alex Ross's work, and I love his timeless covers, but they're all portrait.
Yeah, those Alex Ross is very hit or miss for me. He doesn't nail everybody, and everyone thinks everything he does is great. And
one of my favorite Alex Ross covers is actually a Superman book.
Oh, yeah.
It's when he has Pa Kent in his arms, and Pa Kent's having a heart attack. That's
a great cover.
That is an amazing cover, and the artwork is amazing. And that you don't need to read anything in that issue.
Right.
you just look at that cover and the emotion and the moment is captured. And isn't that, I think that's like, and you think this is on a comic book.
Right.
So,
So,
you know,
Mark,
I just, yeah.
I want to go back to your 58,000 comics, okay? Because that kind of struck me. I knew you had a lot. I didn't realize it was that much. So let me ask you kind of a hypothetical, I don't know, question or something like that. So you have all these comic books, right?
Yes.
So is there one comic book that you don't have that if you would get, you would say, that's it. That makes my collection. I can rest easy now.
Oh,
Just one?
It's just, it's only a 1 hour show. So come on.
I know.
Joe, you're going deep with this question.
Well,
that is.
That's the way I am. I can't help it.
It's a good question.
It is a great question. There's definitely some bucket.
You can give me a couple if you want.
There's some bucket list comic books. You guys have heard me talk about it before. Like, I'm a big fan of Matt Baker, of his artwork and just what he went through to be an artist. If I could get Phantom Lady by Matt Baker, and they said, okay, if you take this, you can't buy another comic book.
Right.
I go, okay.
That's
I would,
nice.
and yep, I would be okay with that. And like, and I've talked about Amazing Fantasy 15. Even if I had an opportunity to buy one, I find it would be so hard to tie up so much of my family's wealth in a book.
Right.
When
like at the end of the day, it's just paper.
Well, and I think that's one of the things about my collecting. I don't have this driving urge to get the most expensive 9.8, the highest grade, the most valuable that is going to, like, I look for books that are entertaining. Like, I don't know if I can get my hands on it, but I found yesterday in the dollar bin the most beat up Submariner that I've seen in ages. Like, it's beat to death, and it's been loved and somebody's read it. But books like that I always find interesting. So I flip back to the ads, and it's in 1971, and there's this little tiny clip of an ad for the San Diego Comic-Con.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I'm thinking, okay, is that from that era? Like, they could afford in the back of a Marvel comic an ad space this big.
Right.
And then you think about what it is today.
Yeah.
That's
I
amazing.
would like to talk to you more about that for a second too, because this is something I've talked to Jerry the Jitterbug a lot about too. Is I think one of the coolest things about comics throughout the history, and they don't do it so much on the back of today's covers, but you could pick up a comic from almost any era and kind of get an eyeball of what it's from based on the ad and the ad on the back page.
Yep.
And you kind of have a good feel of what was going on at the time.
Oh,
And
yeah.
like what the society was like. Like, you wouldn't see a Daisy gun advertised on the back of a comic today.
An example of that, Gary, is I've got a Spirit comic book, The Spirit,
Right.
from many, many years ago. And the back of it is one of the most racist ads that I've seen in a long time. But it was during World War II. And it's targeted. It's a non war related materials used. It was made out of wood, and it was a machine gun made out of wood that a kid could send away to have, and it was called Zappa fill in the blank gun.
Wow.
It rhymed.
Whoa.
And and I have used that book very carefully in my university course when I'm talking about vulnerable sectors and stuff, how some things like we use them for that. And you think about that that's directed at basically
it's a propaganda ad.
Yeah, very much
Right,
propaganda. Right. And if you look in the history of the books and that stuff, that's why the older books are fascinating. Exactly what you say, like that, when this book was done and what was going on, and even some of the caricatures are just
especially
outlandish.
On some of those some of those Wiz comics like Jerry likes so much. Some of those covers you're like, ooh.
Yeah. you have to be very, very careful about. I like I don't think we should get rid of those books, because I think if you get rid of your past, you're going to repeat failures from the past in the future.
Right. You can't ignore the history. The history.
You can't ignore the history, and you can, hopefully it will teach us stuff, and it will teach us to be better people and better human beings. But when you read some of those old books, and that's why when I find those, I go, okay, and that's why I flipped right to the ads for that old Submariner book, because I was kind of like interested. I wanted to see who did the art and stuff, but I wanted to see what they were advertising, and I was pleasantly surprised. Like, holy moly, like there's an ad for San Diego, which I wonder how many people went to that convention back then.
Right. And back then it was actually a book show.
Yeah.
There wasn't a Hall H and all
No,
this.
there was no
Right.
Like, I think if you'd have walked into those things dressed as, like a comic book character, people would be going, what are you doing?
You're a little too far into it, buddy. Yeah.
Yeah.
So,
We're not ready for that for another 40 years. Okay.
Right.
Now, Mark, there's something I
interesting
wanted
that
to
you
touch
brought up
on
the
with
fact
you.
of history and that type of thing, because like the Daisy guns, I think Gary brought up, because as a kid, we didn't think much about that. I mean, we didn't go out and shoot people, do anything. Matter of fact, I was part of I'll call it a gang of kids that lived within a couple of blocks of each other in the West Village back then. And we used to play a game where it was kind of like, it was like either cops and robbers, or it was...
There were good guys and bad guys.
Yeah, good guys and bad guys. It could be Western, whatever it happened to be. And we'd carry around, cap rifles.
Oh, yeah.
In the street, all right? And it would be like 5 against 5. The 5 bad guys would run away, like within a certain area. We'd have to shoot them down. If you shot him, the guy could count to 15. And, if you had to get him back and get to the jail area, and then we'd have breakouts and all that. And nobody came over to us and said, the police, and said, hey, what are you guys doing with those guys?
No.
We played. That was a typical game that we played.
Oh, yeah. Like the same, Joe.
Went up and got our guns, and
we had the cap guns, and we had the pistols and the machine guns, and we had the cool plastic helmets with the camouflage on them. And,
and my point was, that's part of like the history that's there. And we understand that. And in some ways, the question is, why have we gotten to where we are now? So I agree with you. I think keeping that and thinking about that and speaking about your experience really helps to understand perhaps better what's going on now. Because if I tell people that, I'm sure there's some people even in the chat might be aghast at that. And so I would never let my kid do it. I understand. I wouldn't let them do it now either. But the point is, why? And what's the story? And you only know about that and can talk about that if you see what came before.
What came before, exactly.
Whereas, today it may not be acceptable or may not be right or whatever way you want to look at it. But back then it seemed that it was. Why?
Yeah. And I think that's the exactly of this hobby. For some, it is like, this is for financial, this is economics for them. For me, this is because there's amazing, cool stories, and it reflects. And when I find old books like that, Joe, like when we, like the Age of Innocence and all that, and you find the Dell promise to families about quality of their books written in there, and you would make it, anybody should go, well, why is that in there? Why did they have to put that in a book? Well, because, like the pre-code horror books, pushing the envelope. And Jim, you were asking me about the horror. I love the Bronze Age horror. Some of the modern stuff I like. I'm not a huge fan of, like, and this is no slant against the book, but there's a book out now called Red Room.
Oh, I hate it.
I was interested, right? So, and also I like to look at the independents and stuff. So I looked at issue 1 and went, nope, this is not for me.
I did the same thing, Mark. I tried it because I'm a huge horror guy, and look, for the people that like it, good. I mean, it's out there for you, but I could not connect with any part of that at all.
Yeah. And if it's a good, if it's a good vampire, like Little Monsters by Jeff Lemire and Image Comics, it was a series about vampires and kids and stuff. Well written, fantastic story. good horror. I went, yep, I really quite enjoyed it. But
Right.
there's, that's more my jam than that other stuff. So
Now, when you were young, I got a couple questions I really want to ask you, and I'll get to them eventually. But I want to. This is going to be kind of a fun one because we've been serious for a minute. When you were young, one, my parents let me watch whatever I wanted. They knew I could handle it, so I was always big into horror.
Yep.
In your house, was horror something that was shied away from, or were your parents okay with you watching it? They thought you guys were mentally tough enough to handle it and kind of understood. And what was some of the favorite things that you were watching?
My parents were very careful about what I was watching to a degree when they were around, but I was
When they were around.
I'm the youngest. Yeah, I'm the youngest of five, right? So they would go do work and go out, and then my older siblings would be looking after me. So, anything went on the TV. So there was some shows that I probably shouldn't have been watching as a kid, like when Rosemary's Baby hit network television. Like I wasn't, it was kind of like, what?
The one that got me when I was a kid was Let's Scare Jessica to Death.
Oh, well, that's a little bit further down where it didn't scare me to death, but I can tell you, like,
no, I just was like, wow. I watched it and just,
even this is goofy, but even, I was young enough when Lost in Space was on, like some of those monsters, because we still had a black and white TV, like just scared the bejesus out of me. And what was funny is when we got the color TV and I saw him in color, it was kind of like, well, that's a guy in a thin suit.
Right? It took the mystique away, right?
But the scariest one,
that golden that color.
The scariest one for me, and I remember being alone in the apartment, and my parents were next door at my aunt and uncle's, and I got so scared, I was frozen scared, I couldn't get up and just walk the 25 feet to the door and go across. Was Twilight Zone.
Oh,
yeah. They were black and white. First of all, Rod Serling's voice is enough to creep anybody out. Some of the stories. And the way, and it was just like the twist at the end, and you'd say, I remember sitting there saying, like, this, being afraid even to look in the hall, and like just going like saying, can I get up the nerve just to walk out the door and across like about 10 feet?
And the Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock presents.
Yeah.
The Outer Limits. Like,
oh yeah,
scare the bejesus out of you. But then when they came out in comic book form, or I found them in comic book, I couldn't wait to buy them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was like, this is Twilight Zone. This is going to be cool,
right? And even in some of those old books, that's when you saw the Frank Frazetta getting his start in comics.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Like and like, talk about another one of my favorite artists. I love Frazetta, and some of his stuff is pretty out there, pretty dark horror, like Death Dealer, and all of that kind of stuff. Just.
And then he had that one duck character he did too. I can't remember the duck's name.
I can't either. Anyway, yeah, it just.
Now you had the benefit, like you said, of being the youngest of 5 kids, because it's me and my sister, so I was the oldest. So when you're the oldest, you don't get away with anything because your parents are new to having children, and everything is strict for you. And then you're watching your younger one, but you never let me do that, and they don't care by that point. Yep. So you were 5 kids deep, so your parents must have really been lenient with you.
They actually, my brother Doug and I were talking about this last weekend because he was up visiting, and Gary, you have no idea what I got away with. But also I had the luxury of watching the 4 of them before me. You go, oh, don't do that. Like, don't ever run from Dad, because that's bad. So, but it also, like, because you think about it, like, my parents were married in 1950, and my brother Dave was born in 51. So they were born in 20, like, they were pretty young, and we have kids raising kids, and then by the time I came along, they've had 4 before. They're more mature. They're getting their act together. And my dad was taking all these psychology courses and all that kind of stuff. So I got to do all sorts of things that my siblings never got to do. I could argue with my parents, which my siblings sure couldn't. And
Oh boy.
Wow.
so the benefit of that was being the youngest is when they did leave, they left a lot of their stuff behind. And I got a lot of it because,
Nice. Some cool hand-me-downs.
yeah, I didn't get my oldest brother's Playboy collection for some reason, but I got a lot of.
Now, when you were young too, so every kid always has like a favorite toy when they're young. What was it? Did you have like a favorite toy that they just couldn't get away from you for a while?
Oh yeah, yeah. Like when I was really young, it was a Yogi Bear, stuffed Yogi Bear
Hey,
with the
Boo
green
Boo.
hat. It didn't have Boo Boo, just Yogi, and he's Yogi's right over there in that cabinet. And
Your
And
original
then-
Yogi?
yeah,
Nice.
my original Yogi, he's over there. Maybe known as a bit of a pack rat, not throw anything away. Anyway,
They call that hoarders.
no, you see, I can walk around in my basement, so. But yeah, like the I really like the 12-inch GI Joes from the 60s
Right.
and the 70s, and Best of the West Marks, Johnny West, and like those guys with the horses. Like, so you had GI Joe, and they all worked together and go on grand adventures, and I played with those, and my buddies and I we played with those for hours and hours because we lived in a very small town. It was rural, working the farms and stuff. So back then you could grab, your Tonka sized truck that
Metal.
you modified to fit
The metal
the
Tonka,
12-inch
by the way.
stickers. Yeah, the metal Tonkas, the real ones. So we would
Yeah.
modify those to fit the GI Joes, and then we had a handle that we crafted, and we'd be gone into
Yeah.
the fields and in the woods for hours. Like,
Right. And you could back then, because I remember my parents wouldn't know where I was for an entire
Oh,
day
yeah.
until I
We
came
were
home
gone
at
all day.
night.
Yep.
Out in the woods,
Yep.
you're out there. There's coyotes. There's all sorts of crap.
Oh, yeah.
They'll make it home.
They'll come home.
As long as you were home before
yeah.
it got dark, they didn't care.
Oh, yeah. Like, yeah, you were home before. If the lights were coming on while you were beetling home, you were in trouble. If you didn't get in
The worst thing though is if you grew up in the city like I did, and you did something because you'd be out all day, you'd be doing things, and one of the neighbors saw you. It could be anybody from the church, and you could be like 10 blocks
Yeah.
away, but there was somebody who knew you, and you
Yep.
go home and you say,
Mhm.
"Mrs. Smith said that you." The only time I got home almost hit by a car. I mean, the car stopped about this far away from me. I didn't.
The news got home before you did, didn't it?
And I just I ran home like crazy. I was like so upset and all that. The next day, my mother comes, "Did you almost get hit by a car last night?" So if you're out in the woods, I don't know if there's anybody there to snitch on you. Right?
no.
Right?
You got snitched
No,
on all the
you
time.
would be amazed. You would spend all day away doing stuff in the woods, and we'd have forts, and we had we made campfires and all that kind of stuff. And
Sword
that
fighting
was all.
with sticks and smacking each other. We used to have crab
yeah,
apple
we had
fights.
you made shields out of bark and whacking each other with and climbing hills and doing all sorts of.
Did you ever climb a tree so high you wondered if you were going to get down?
Oh yeah,
And then you get up there and you're like,
yeah.
and the terror sets in, and then you're like,
One of the, or you'd be at the family farm and you'd be playing in the haymow, and if they caught you, because we used to do some really crazy things, so it was always fun. But your parents, Joe, even when you didn't think there was a soul around, I would come home and I would be getting a bit of a play-by-play of what I had been doing, and you go. And this was before cell phones and drones or anything. Like, I don't know how they knew.
Yeah. It's because, well, for me, it was like what Joe said. Somebody would see me and go, "What's he doing way over here?" Like, she knew one time we had crossed a road that we had no business crossing. And she was like, "What were you doing all the way over there? And how did you not die crossing that road?" And don't you ever do that again type thing.
Yeah.
But we always had Evil Knievel and G.I. Joe do a crossover team up. You know, like
Oh, yeah.
the Joes needed Evil Knievel, and that was because of comics. That's what it made.
Exactly.
You know, you'd have those team ups.
Yep.
Because my friend had
Oh, yeah.
a great Evil Knievel collection.
Well, that I had the one of my prizes were is as I had the Bionic Man that you could see through Steve Trevor's
Oh,
eye.
yeah,
It
yeah,
had
yeah.
that one eye thing. I just
Yeah,
thought that
sure.
was the coolest thing. And
Yeah.
if you look through it, it's complete garbage. But when you're a kid, it's so magical.
Well,
Yeah,
one of
it's
the
the
last
best.
GI Joes was the bionic guy. I can't think of what his name is, but his eye, like if you push, there was a clear spot through the top of his head to his one eye,
Yeah.
and if you put your thumb over it, the eye would go normal, and then you take it off, and his eye would blink, and that was supposed to be his laser eye and stuff. And when you look at him today, you're kind of going, it's like he's somewhere here close. But anyway, it was goofy and all those things. Eventually you'd find them on a comic book,
Right.
Yeah, sure.
or you'd find an old one that you didn't know about. Like the first time I found a GI Joe comic book from the 50s, I thought, well, is this the same guy? And then oh no, that this is a different one. But it all kind of weirdly ties together. And it's just, I think comic books for me, they give me entertainment.
You mean Trevor, damn it.
My youth. What was that?
Because I said Steve Trevor by accident. Wonder Woman's guy, not
Yeah.
Yeah, I just glossed over that, Gary. It's okay.
Yeah, Jackson, it's okay for someone to misspeak once in a while, you big bully.
Yeah.
So one of the questions I really wanted to ask you tonight, Mark, and
Yeah.
I kind of like to find this out about people, like especially like with the teachers, where they would bring comics and make it a part of their job.
Yeah.
Being a police officer, were comics ever you would get home and you just needed to escape? Were they ever an escape from your job for you? Like
yeah.
you just needed to come home and do something that wasn't completely wax your mind?
Yeah. And as like where I was as our sons were born and being raised, because you kind of get dialed into them and you're introducing them to comics and stuff. And my taste in not taste in books, but the books I grabbed were more to do stuff with them. But then, as they got a bit older, and then, it's just like, okay, I'm just going to go read a comic book and just, kind of figure out.
Put my mind elsewhere.
Yeah, put my mind elsewhere. And I would do that, like, I would bring heavy metal to high school to read.
Nice.
And
Really?
The teacher didn't take it away from you?
well, it
I was
sure
going to say,
caused.
nobody took that away?
No, they didn't, because we had this really interesting. It was called the reading program, right? And they had all these different things. So and I'm an avid reader. Like I have a lot of novels and hardcovers and books and stuff, right? And I know you're wondering how big my house is. I play Tetris like you wouldn't believe. Anyway,
Pack it well.
pack it well. So I always kind of took offense of the fact, well, you don't think I read, so you're giving me this hour in high school to read. So I would bring a heavy metal, and it would just drive them to distraction, because I was reading and they didn't want, like, should we take it away? And I was careful because of some of the heavy metals, because you had to be careful, because I didn't want to flip a page and have them lose their mind. And
Right.
also I mentioned my dad was a school teacher, and the town that I went to high school in it was a little bit bigger than the town I grew up in. My dad taught in the bigger town. And even in the small town of my public school, like all the teachers are my dad's friends. So they had carte blanche to, like, if he gets out of line, you have my permission.
Right.
Go to town. And so I knew that if I took something really questionable, like my dad would have known about it before I even had the page turned.
Wow.
So
Wow.
yeah, but as a distraction and as an escapism, absolutely. Like that's the fun of them. They're
Right.
Yeah.
they are an escape thing. And I think now that I'm retired and I've really gotten back into the hobby, they're a distraction and they're fun, but I'm having more fun trying to fill those holes in some of these series.
Amen.
And and going back and finding that book that you used to have but you don't have anymore, or like,
Oh, yeah.
I remember this one book and that hunt and that sense of there it is. And
I was
flipping through
going
and
to ask you about that. Like, do you really enjoy the hunt now and just being able to?
Oh, I do. Like
Do you try to get it in the wild before you get it online?
oh yeah, I try to like I have like this circuit through town that I don't do all the time, but when I go, okay, I'm going on a shopping circuit, like I hit the hawk shops and the secondhand stores and the we call it like Value Village, or like they're the thrift stores that for raising money and stuff like that. So and I look for them I try to find them and see, because sometimes you find books like $1.50. I just missed a secondhand bookstore. A buddy of mine texted me. He went, "Hey, look what I just picked up at the name of the bookstore." And I went, "Your kid, you got that there?" And it was the first appearance of Blade, or first appearance of Ghost Rider, and
the Marvel Spotlight 5?
Yeah.
Wow, that's like a $5,000 book.
Yeah, he picked it up at the
That's
secondhand bookstore for $15.
Wow.
Nice.
So they're out there. They're still out there. And that's what I love, is to be able to find it. Now, I do yard sales and stuff, but I'm also, when I'm doing yard sales, I'm one of those guys that will say, okay, you shouldn't be selling this for $1.
Right.
Yeah, you want to appreciate
like
Yeah, you say it should be 50 cents.
Should be 50 cents. Well, it depends.
Yeah.
If it's a person who should know better, Joe, like
2 cents. 2 cents.
Yeah, 2 cents. If it's the professional yard sailor that they have the yard sale every other week, and that you find something like, well, okay, you're just being lazy and don't look it up. But when you have like the nice older family, they're cleaning out their house, and they wheel something out, and you go, this might be worth more than what you're asking for it. I do that, and it's sometimes they'll take it and they'll run it back in the house, and other times they'll say, here, take it. So, like an example, it wasn't a comic book, it was Pygmalion by George Bernard Shaw. I'm looking at books, and there's a copy of a pretty old 1950s.
Was it a first print or?
Well, I opened the book, and it was, yes, it's to Miss Gladys Irving. Yes, it's still in print. They're just too lazy. Here's a copy, compliments of the author, G or S. Bernard Shaw, signed 1920.
That's crazy.
Yeah, 19, whatever it is. So I took that back to the lady selling it, and I said, "Do you know what this is?" And she said, "Oh yeah." I said, "He signed it." And she goes, "Yep."
Wow.
I said, doesn't anybody want this? She goes, "No." And I said, well, and she said, it's the sign said it was like fill a box for $5. And I went, no. And she went, well, if you don't take it, I'm putting it back on the table. So I gave her my name and address and all that stuff and handed it to her. But there's things out there in the wild still that I love to find. And it's just hoot. It's just, I don't know.
That's crazy. Well, at that point though, you did your due diligence with her, so
right.
I still feel weird about it. I still have, I know exactly where that house is down in Muskoka that I bought that at. If anybody from that family ever wants that, it's still here, because I sure didn't pay very much for it.
Right. Wow. And what a piece of history that is from him.
Well,
to that woman, right?
Well, yeah, exactly. Why would you sell stuff like that? It's just, anyway, but that has nothing to do with comics. That's just one of my.
That's okay. In the hot seat's about the person, not just comics.
Right.
Well,
it's not about the comics. That's one of those great stories that we all like. I mean, I love doing the antique circuit around here in town. I mean, there's a few places. I mean, it's an antique store. It's 2 antique stores, and then the secondhand book thing. That's where I found that. Was at the secondhand book thing, and they people around here bring their books there when somebody passes or whatever, because they can get store credit. and they can go get whatever they want. And so they have a decent comic collection thing going there, because people that bring it, they don't know what the comic is, but they know what books they want. And, you know, so.
Yeah. And I miss secondhand bookstores. There used to be so many, and
there's none around here. When I lived in the village, that's where I bought some of my 5-cent books.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that, Joe. It was a secondhand bookstore. And like Allison the Bookman here in North Bay, in North Bay, it's like it's been around for years and years and years, and that's where it's part of my circuit. I'm always looking to see what may have come in there, and they're really well versed in stuff, and they look things up, but they're in to move books, like so they're selling, like, and you know there's some books.
And I think a lot of people, when you're talking about, I'm sorry, Jim, when you're talking about the paperbacks, especially, they don't realize that some of those first prints are worth a lot of money.
They are, like I got a bunch of the Frazetta cover books from Bantam at a secondhand bookstore down in Southern Ontario for like $2 a book.
Oh wow! I tried to get some here, and they were going for like $12-15. I picked up a couple. And it's just because I love the art and I love they're over there. Right. So now let's talk about your your little room behind you.
Yes.
Was there a method to the madness of setting it up, or did it kind of put itself together as things came into the collection?
Actually, this room there's a bit of method to my madness, because I just started in the last few years, as my sons have launched and gone off, I've actually got my basement back.
Nice.
So I've been able to, it's just been in the last probably 6 or 7 years that I actually have got all my comics in one spot. You know, like,
nice.
And when COVID hit, it gave me a chance to actually organize it again, and organize it. So they're in bins by like, I have some bins that are my favorite artists examples. I have other bins by character, by title. You know, I have them all divided up by DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, Image, other, you know, like all that kind of stuff. And it's nice to be able to, and then I have all the residual stuff like that right there. That's a Best of the West lunchbox.
Nice.
Or Wild West lunchbox, rather.
Wild West. Yeah, I love that show. Yeah,
I did too. Artemis Gordon, you know, like Adam West. That was a great show. They had their own train with cool stuff on it.
That was super.
You know, like that right there's a Major Matt Mason. Behind me over here, you can't see it. There's like, you know, Space 1999 stuff. There's Buck Rogers stuff. There's Star Trek stuff. There's, you know, there's Conan stuff. But the artwork on the walls, like that right there, is my youngest son's art. He painted that with its compilation of The Good, Bad, and the Ugly. And then because of Alex Ross, you know, like these, Joe, that's all Alex Ross. Yeah. The big ones, that's Alex Ross. That right, there is Dave Bratton's Conan.
Yeah.
That right beside that envelope on the wall is Madame Blaster's sketch of me on an outside of an envelope. Well, you guys get great big portraits. I get little tiny ones.
She redid your portrait. She made you go out on the second one. You can't complain about it anymore.
Yes, I can. Anyway, so it's kind of like, and then I rotate it around like I've got slabs up here. I've got, you know, some there's 7, 8 slabs up on the wall. I've got my cards that I showed you.
Those
sheet.
are amazing.
Yeah,
and
that my
son built for you.
Yeah, I'm working on getting that put together, and I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to hang those and up. You know, like it's this eclectic little piece where I can kind of go down. I can come down here and disappear, and like I have every Overstreet printed over there.
Wow.
So once in a while I'll pick those off. Like Overstreet #1 it just kills me because of the prices of the books. Like, you know,
It's just
like,
fun to see, right?
oh yeah, it is. It's fun to see and go, okay, how old was I then? And boy, was I ever dumb, because
Right.
Yeah.
with my paper route
Yeah.
money, I could have bought that.
Yeah.
And then you look
Yeah.
at it and go, damn it, Joe kept his.
And Joe kept it.
Only half
Yeah.
of them. Only
Yeah.
half.
Joe kept
And
it.
I didn't know anything about Spider-Man until a friend of mine told me about it. So I started with number 9, and when I looked for the old ones in the secondhand bookstore and stuff, I only found one, number 5.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
So if I had a lot of like Fantastic Four other ones, but Spider-Man said, "What's this stupid Spider-Man thing?" You know.
Yeah.
And then I just started buying it, and I said, "It's pretty cool."
full disclosure, I cut one up.
Yeah.
Because I made a poster for school with it was first cover appearance of Kingpin.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep, I did that.
Oh
A
man.
lot of them.
Because
So let me ask you another fun question now, because I like to go back and forth between the serious and the fun. So little Mark Andrews watching TV.
yep.
Who was your first celebrity crush as a kid?
Oh, geez.
Like mine was obviously I tell the tale is Aaron Gray.
Well, yeah, but my very first TV crush was Barbara Eden.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I dream of
followed
Genie. Sure.
very closely by
There's no Elizabeth Montgomery, Mark. I gotta tell you.
yeah.
She's-
Well, I
No.
was going to say
Montgomery's better.
followed very closely
Barbara
by
Eden-
Elizabeth
Barbara Eden
Montgomery.
all the way.
I
My
think
God.
Elizabeth Montgomery is one of the most beautiful women that's ever existed.
Barbara Eden.
Well, see, they were both on at the same time, so I was okay either way.
Right?
But
But
We're
it was the
conflated.
fantasy story of I Dream of Jeannie
yes,
better
And-
than the Bewitched stuff. I mean,
exactly. And
come on,
you
that
know,
was
like,
kind of like family thing and stuff. I Dream of Jeannie was God. Why didn't I find that damn bottle?
no kidding. Yeah, and so like Barbara Eden, Elizabeth Montgomery,
Mhm.
those were my first crushes on TV. I could get really weird and say, well, I've watched some of the Linda Evans on Big Valley, but that was a long time ago, and
Big
I didn't see
Valley.
it till much later.
Right. Hey, you always find stuff, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. But Aaron Gray, like Buck Rogers, that was okay to watch that show too.
Right.
That was
Barbara
When
Eden
Barbarella
called-
came out with Jane Fonda.
But Barbara Eden called him Master. It was like Master. It's a preliminary to Star Wars, I would say.
Yeah,
Oh, yeah.
Samantha was a little more snarky. So I like the I like
well,
the
she was
broom
also
had.
she was obviously the one who ran the household, even though he thought he did,
Right.
he didn't.
Right.
So
No.
and then you had the Batman series. Like my favorite Catwoman was Eartha Kitt. I just thought she was like a riot, and it was a different. I didn't have a crush on her, but when I watched Eartha Kitt as Catwoman, she was my number one Catwoman, and then Lee Merriweather was my second, and that's not normal. But Lee Merriweather was on Time Tunnel,
Yes. that's
so
right.
I knew that.
So I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
But you just reminded me too of that era of stuff, right? When we were kids. I think part of the problem with stuff today is all information is immediately at your fingertips, and there's no wonder left in the world.
Well,
All the stuff back then, everything had this sense of wonder because you didn't know. You could just make up these craziest things, and you could really lose yourself in it and suspend your disbelief. You weren't going to go to Google and look it up and have, oh, that's bullshit. It's just there was all this wonder and mystique around stuff, which made
and you
it so
had to
much fun.
actually wait a week for the next episode, and then they went on hiatus, and you couldn't. You had
I
to
hated
wait,
hiatus.
Right.
Yeah, for the fall season, the new season to come, and you were, and there was none of that. There was no such thing as streaming and
Right.
watching every episode all in one fell swoop, and that kind of stuff. And there was always something new, and it was pretty cool. And I miss some of those ideas of some of those shows. When you think about Lost in Space and Time Tunnel and Land of the Giants, and Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea and
Right.
all of those kind of really cool shows growing up. And I don't see that kind of thing of the World of Wonder and stuff. And yeah, there were some of them, there were guys in rubber suits, but it was the story.
Watch Sea Hunt with
Yeah.
Lloyd Bridges.
And Sea Hunt,
And I think the last modern show that had that kind of feel to me was Sliders.
yeah,
I
absolutely.
really love Sliders.
I'd go along with that. Yeah, that was.
It was a harken back to the old style.
Yeah, and it was a great show. And then they kind of, I don't know what happened in the last part of it. This writing kind of went, ugh.
Right. Once Jonathan Rhys Davies was gone.
Yep. Yeah.
But I was always a big Rembrandt fan.
He was
great.
Yeah, that was a good show. Like, and you're right. You don't see a lot of those. Even like the $6 Million Man and the Bionic Woman and Star Trek and all of those shows that I like. Star Trek for me was such a cool show, and actually my dad really encouraged us to watch Star Trek.
Well, because they actually talked about topical issues disguised in a sci-fi. Not so much
sci-fi format, but it was common stuff going on today, and and there was like the first officer was an alien, you had Nichelle Nichols, she was an officer on the bridge and all that stuff, and it was really cool. Like, I love
the thing was that they did it like the Star Trek. I mean, I watched it all the time. My history teacher actually required us to watch it.
Oh, that's cool.
Question about it on the Monday. But I was just recently on one of the channels or whatever, or someplace, and I saw there was a Quantum Leap thing going on where they were showing one after the other. And I watched a few of them again. And what I remembered about it was that there was always something where he had to, quote unquote, fix something. People were going to have, like, someone's going to pass away, or people are going to lose their house or whatever else. And he had to do something so that terrible thing didn't happen. So it was about doing good deeds all the time.
Yeah.
Right.
And he was stuck in this kind of continuum, but he was stuck there until he did whatever he needed to do to get back. But the point, there was always kind of a moral to those stories.
Yeah.
And it was always the hero was always trying to find out what it was and to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And I think that helped even with the kind of whole societal thing. When you look at these type of things, Star Trek or Quantum Leap or even a lot of the other shows that were on, it was always about doing the right thing.
And Sliders was even about that for like the first couple seasons. Sliders were telling those type of stories.
Yeah.
They would end up with a jump somewhere that they couldn't control. Then they ended up in a situation where they had to fix it and do right before they could slide again.
Right.
And I don't know if we still have that. Like, I look for shows and I don't watch, in all honesty, I don't watch a lot of TV anymore. Like, even with all the streaming services stuff, it's like, if I can find it on YouTube and watch some of the reruns, I found Land of the Giants and all that kind of stuff on reruns. I'm even finding like stuff that I mentioned these shows before that I don't know how, if they ever made it big in the States, like the Jerry Anderson shows. Like, he did Space 1999 and he did UFO. They were live action. Those were really cool shows. But before that, he was the puppet guy, right? With like Captain Scarlet and Supercar and Stingray and Joe 90 and all those shows they were English, but they were thanks. And they were really kind of fun shows, and I found them online again, and I'm watching some of them, and it's mindless entertainment to a degree, but it just makes me smile because I think about my childhood, and that's, again, you look around me, and I'm not escaping reality because it's here all the time, but it's also like you immerse yourself in this kind of a hobby, and there is some it does remind me that there's still there's good in the world, and when I say that, I think about this community. This community gives me a lot of hope and faith in a lot of things, because we have people that we've gotten to know through this community from all over the world.
Right. It's
and
amazing.
it is amazing, and it's connected through a funny books.
Well, and it tells you the importance of this stuff too. Like, and it was always weird to me, and I've said it before. People will appreciate art, they'll appreciate writing, but you put the two together, and all of a sudden, it's taboo for some
Oh
reason.
yeah. Like, why would you waste your time reading a comic? Well, did you read that one? Because it had a pretty interesting story in it, and it
Right.
was
Subdued themes.
yep, yeah. Like there's a I got it's over on a shelf over there. It's a really old comic, and it's a different format, but it's about Harriet Tubman.
Oh,
But it's a
nice.
comic.
Right.
Mhm.
Like read them and see what before you make a snap judgment about it. They're not all
Right.
Looney Tunes about bugs making Elmer look like a
Right.
doofus. It's like you know some of them are, but there's a lot that aren't.
So when in your reading, because we none of us have asked you about any of your favorite stories. So like the other night when we had Joe on, and he was whatever happened to the man of tomorrow.
yeah.
What's one of your classic reads that influenced you a lot that you still go back and read, much like Joe reads that?
I figured you were going to ask me that question, Gary, and I was really going, okay, which book do I go? I need to read that again, and just there's so many that are out there. There's the like the first story arcs of Spider-Man when he was still just a kid, and he's
Right.
having all that angst as a kid, as a young teenager, and his girlfriend dies while he's trying to save her, and like he's kicked in the guts again and again, and he keeps coming back to do the right thing, and that's that story arc that I now have, like I have it in the trades as opposed to the originals to read through. I'll go back and read some of those stories. In fact, tomorrow's lecture for my college course is the topic is police powers. And the second slide of my presentation is Uncle Ben telling Peter, with great power comes great responsibility.
Oh, nice.
And
Nice.
I truly believe that. And I use that as a learning point for these young folks that want to get into the field of frontline response. And that story for me is one that you can pull stuff from and kind of go and expand it into a bigger universe.
Right. Yeah. And while people are making fun of these books, they don't realize all the lessons that are in them.
Well, and that
Yeah.
simple one with Uncle Ben, and the tragedy that Peter does because he takes that power and doesn't use it wisely at first.
Right.
And
Like anyone wouldn't that's that young.
And I can tell you, when I became an officer, I was 21. And that's a lot of responsibility to put on a young person's head. Right. And they need to understand that responsibility to the community at large, your town, your family, everyone else. And so yeah, I'm going to expose a bunch of students tomorrow to a slide that's got Spider-Man on it. That's
but I think that's kind of cool, right? Because let's
they better not be watching this, because then they're going to be bored. Like they'll go, here it is. Yeah.
Well, I was talking about this yesterday with a friend of mine that used to be a policeman, right? And people don't realize, that at the end of the day, it's a job. You just want to finish your shift. You want to go home. You want to be with your family. You just want to go home and be yourself.
Yeah.
You're facing your responsibility, but it's more because at any given day, anything can happen. So every day you're going to something unpredictable. You're going into situations that you may or may not be able to control, but it's still just a job, and you just want to get through that day and go home.
Well, it is, Gary, it is just a job. However, when you sign up for that, and I did it for a long time, and every day that I wouldn't think about it every day, but every day I was prepared that anyone that, whether I knew them or didn't know them, I would die for you. Like you three, because Matt seems to disappear. You three gents sitting there tonight, like if I was still working and I went, okay, if I don't do something, you're going to die, but it may cost me my life. That's my job.
Right.
And got it.
That's pretty heavy when you throw that onto the shoulders of a 21-year-old.
Right.
But,
when they still don't understand mortality quite yet.
Oh no, I sure didn't at 21, but it's interesting as you get a little, and Joe, don't start talking about it because you kept talking about it the last two shows. That
I'm stopping.
Okay, good.
I just wrote the text for a video that I'm going to put together, and that was cathartic for me, so I'm okay now.
Okay, good. I feel better now. Anyway, it's that's pretty heavy stuff, but I try to inspire the people who want to do this job because we have a public trust, and it's been breached a lot by my colleagues, by not all of them, by some, and that's not okay, and that is what it is. But
well, I don't assign to the perception, especially the one that the media paints, that to me, in growing up, maybe it's how I was brought up, but police, they protect and they serve.
Yep.
So I've never, like, if I've had like a light out in my car, or at any time I've been pulled over, and it hasn't been often. I don't have anything on my record. I'm clean. I'm sure you know. But but
you live in a different country, Gary. It's not that easy.
People in other countries, I'm sure.
Yeah, but
you don't just know, and just a few people in Moose Town. But when they're walking up to the car,
I don't know who you are.
Exactly, but when they knock on the window and do you know why? I don't, but I just treat them like a person. I've never ever in my life had an issue. I've never had anyone that was in that position of power act untoward toward me. And maybe I've just been fortunate, but everyone's been completely reasonable.
Yeah, and it is. When I'm teaching my university and college students, I always talk to them about the interaction with the public. Is you may have had a really tough day and a long day, and you've had interactions with 24 people, but that 25th one, this will be possibly their very first and only time of interacting with a police officer.
Yeah.
So how do you want that to go?
What's the experience you're going to give them?
What's the experience you're going to give them? So, and that is what it is. And if you can't do that, then if you can't say, I'm going to die for you today, Joe, to keep you safe. And if you can't say that, then you shouldn't be doing this job.
Right. No, it's a good perspective, but it's something I think, you're talking about teaching. It's something that you got to relay to the class and make sure that they understand that.
Oh yeah. And you try, you do your best, but it's a far different world out there than when I started in 1983. Right. But
and the thing
my
is,
very first shift, by the way, Gary, was Halloween.
Oh wow! Kind of like a hazing shift, right?
Oh
yeah! Oh no!
Halloween. Yeah, it was night shift. It wasn't day shift. It was Halloween night shift.
Now, Mark, just for fun, when you first got into being an officer, did the fellow officers give you a hazing period?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. And on my detachment, they hadn't had a rookie in 5 years. So what was the most fun was the guy who was 5 years my senior.
Yeah.
He came to me, and there was two of us came at the same time. He came to both of us and just went, thank you. Because the heat was off him. So, the corporal would wander up with the tire gauge tester. I need you to check all the tires on all the cars. It's like there's this much snow, and you got to get right in there, and you know, and all sorts of other things that will the cone of silence is firmly lowered. So that will be the end of those stories.
Okay. We will let it go at that.
Yeah.
Now, we're going to go around the horn because we've gone for an hour and a half. So we're going to do
Oh,
some
Lord.
final questions here. My final one will be a fun one, but we'll get to me last. Let's start, Jim. Let's start with you, and then we'll go to Joe.
So my question is, I'm going back to the fact of all the books that you have. You have two sons. Has it already been established who's getting what? Because I'm always curious about that. You're going to the great buy and buy. How did Dad chop up the collection? Because you have sons that are interested.
Very. And what's good is they both have different interests. So my youngest son is more of, you know, certain characters and certain titles, and you know, so they're both different. Like one's really quite interested in DC, but he's got some Marvel heroes, but they're not the same each other. Gotcha. And so we've been having conversations about stuff like that because who knows, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know.
Yeah.
The only thing I make sure is I keep telling my bride, like, don't have a yard sale.
Right.
Yeah.
And
now, do you use like CLZ or anything, or do you have?
No, I'm really old school.
Spreadsheet
I've got an Excel spreadsheet, and it's
Excel spreadsheet. That's fine.
And it's saved in 3 different locations. It's on a stick, and it's over here, and there's
absolutely.
So, and within that, I have all sorts of good information about this book is signed if you look, or this book is whatever. And but we talk about it. My boys and I talk about all of this stuff and what you would like. And they've actually said, Dad, if you're looking just to reduce the collection, it's okay if you sell those books, right? They'll identify, like,
right.
But it's interesting. Like I have. I think it's smart to do that as a collector. I think it's
he's picking on Jim. That's Jim's brother.
Oh, I see.
That's my brother.
I see. So there's some story there to that, Jim. So I think it's smart for anyone who has a collection of anything to have those conversations, and you have to face your own mortality. Because but if it goes to the winds, it's how it goes to the winds, because somebody had a lot of these books prior to me,
right?
Sure.
So
they'll make a whole new generation happy.
Yeah, I hope, like I have the entire, not every issue because there was multiple prints, but I have every issue of Classic Illustrated from 1 to 199 kind of thing.
One of the first series to do multiple covers.
Yeah, and they did multiple covers on many of them. But I have I think now I have every one of them is at least the first issue, like the premiere issue. Now I know that neither of my son is too interested at the moment about those, but my oldest brother's starting to get kind of my oldest son, the oldest brother, starting to get kind of interested in those. So who knows? We'll see. But it's hard to do it.
It's got to be really satisfying as their dad to have kids that share the same interests as you.
Oh yeah, like we've been going to Fan Expo in Toronto for over 18 years, like 20 years, the three of us. And
wow, nice.
And playing, and like we still go to the movies together. Like they'll buy the tickets online, and they'll always buy 3. Like, you're coming with us, aren't you? Yep.
Nice.
So.
Joe, you have a final question, sir?
I've been one of the co-hosts on this a couple of times, and I'm going to ask you the same last question that I've asked in the past. If you could look back and speak to your 10-year-old self and tell him what you've got right now, how do you think your 10-year-old self would react?
My 10-year-old self would react as he's cutting up the first cover appearance of Kingpin.
Yeah.
What? I
Would.
actually, you know what, Joe? My 10-year-old self would say to me now, probably he would go, so it worked. Because you guys are really going to think I'm a hoarder. Like, I do have my Yogi Bear over there.
Right.
I do have my G.I. Joes. I do have my Billy Blastoff, if you guys even know who that is. I have
No, and I don't.
No.
my well, look up Billy Blastoff.
That's what I'm doing.
I don't have all of them because I played with them to the point where they fell apart. But I also thought, these are really cool and I want to look after them. And I played them like mad. Like some of my Tonka toys, the metal ones that I have, are beat to death, but I still have my very first green Tonka Jeep.
Wow.
So my 10-year-old self would probably go, really? And she let you keep it all?
Yeah.
Or your
Exactly.
10-year-old self would look at that and just be lost in wonder, like,
Yeah.
I'm going to go spend all my time there.
Well, and you know
Yeah.
what? I'm lost in wonder when I come down here because there's times when I go looking for stuff and I go, oh yeah, I can't believe I still have that. That's pretty cool. And then immediately I smile and go, and because it takes you back, right?
Right. Well,
Does
that's
that answer the question, Joe?
Yeah, sure.
I mean,
Thanks.
the
You're
power of
being awfully-
nostalgia is
You're
amazing.
being very gracious.
I am.
I would-
I told you I would be nice to you tonight, didn't I?
I know. That's awfully decent.
I know. I'm a
Yes,
decent
you're right,
guy.
Jackson. Like, who is this all weird? I turn out like that? Oh my God.
Right? All right. So my last question is always a fun one.
Well, this has been fun, even when we were talking serious, even though we got a little deep on some stuff.
Well, I mean, silly. Like,
Yeah.
when you're any era now, right?
Yep.
Any comic era. So you get to pick a comic, and you get a death scene in the comic. What comic are you dying in? Who's the artist drawing your death, and who's writing your death? And whose comic is it? Like, like Digger Jim would die in a Godzilla comic, getting stomped on him as he's going through New York.
Yeah. Well, though I do love Alex Ross, I'd love to have been drawn by Neil Adams.
Yeah.
And this is interesting, Gary, because this has changed. Probably this changes a little bit in the last little while because I actually got to meet and talk with him at length, and I've read some of his stuff. I've met both of these authors. So I've met Jeff Lemire. I love his writing, and it's his writing is I like it a lot. But I've now met Jim Zub, and I would love to have him write me off in a Conan book.
Nice. Best answer to that question ever so far. In this
Come on.
He's playing you, Gary. He's playing you.
No, I'm not.
Yeah, what a suck up.
I'm sorry. You guys can't see. There's Conan stuff all around me. There's Conan is standing right there.
Trust me, he sends me a lot of Conan stuff on Instagram with pictures and stuff.
So
he spent some of my money.
Because the character of Conan, and this isn't because it's Gary's show and because I want to be on it again and all that stuff. It is just because of the way he's written in the comic books. He's the fighting he's this last one where he's thinking, okay, I could bug her off right now, but she's gonna die if I don't. And
she tried to save us.
Yeah, and sitting down and talking with the author, and he and I were talking today because he teaches college and I teach college, and we were both talking about our the first class and the madness and stuff. I think I would be okay with that.
Nice.
And that's changed. That I would have answered differently probably a month ago, Gary.
Wow. That's cool though.
Good answer.
So, and I think that's another thing about this hobby is there's always someone new coming.
Right.
And people need to stay out of these ruts. Like, this is the only person who can write a comic book, and this is the only person who can draw it, and this is the only person who can ink whatever, right? Those people are incredible artists and writers, and I love them to pieces, and maybe they won't ever be equaled or matched, but there are other brand new writers and artists that have got new ideas, and they're coming down the pipe, and we need to keep an open mind and see. And that's why I like so much of the independents and the independent comic publishers, and you find this writer's knocking it out of the park. I'm really enjoying it.
Right. And you can't, like, nostalgia is great, right? But you go back and you watch some of your old shows, you read some of your old books.
Yeah.
They're not all spectacular.
Oh no!
You have to admit that to yourself, regardless of how much you love it.
Oh
You're
yeah!
like, ooh, okay.
Oh, that was bad, but
Right? Can't believe I was into that.
yeah, but also because I know that I'm setting myself up here, but we mature as readers and as people.
Right.
You're just setting
Look at
Jackson
Joe.
up.
His mouth he's like biting tongue. I can't. There's blood running out of the
Hard. It's hard. I promise.
But it is, like, there's so
Mark,
much.
somehow Mark Andrews and mature don't match up for me. I just doesn't work for me.
And it's just unjust. Jim, like, you're just meeting me, right? Like, come on, anyway. Yeah, there's new things coming all the time. That's why this hobby is such fun. Like,
That's why it's still around.
I agree.
yeah. So, as long as I can sensibly participate in it. And you have to remember, when I talk about how many books I've had, that's over 55 years.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Realistically, like
Right. It's a lifetime of collecting.
yeah. And I thank God I didn't have the situation Joe had, where they had to move.
Mhm.
Like I was born and raised in the house my dad built, and we never
Nice.
moved. So
Nice.
we sold that house when my parents passed away.
That's
I
a rarity to stay in one home your whole
I know it is. So that's why, like, and it was a big house. There was 5 kids in it. So there was everybody, we had enough bedrooms and stuff, and, we had to share rooms, 2 brothers and 2 brothers. But, but anyway, as people went to school, you boxed their stuff up and you took over their bedroom.
Right.
But it is, so
Boxed
it's a
some of
long
their
time.
stuff up and kept some of their stuff.
Yeah, this is pretty cool. So it's a huge collection, but it's been a lifelong thing, and it's still going. And how many things can we say that about, right?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, like, what hobby when you were a kid is still around today,
yeah, like lawn darts isn't a hobby
Or
anymore.
in its original form even, right?
Well, yeah. And I know, like, the form is changing, and people are getting kind of wound up about, well, it's electronic, you can read it, you don't need to buy it. But I mean, you're buying it online, and there's digital copies, and that's awesome. And I have read some of the stuff online, and I have nothing against it at all, but there's still some I like to have the paper in my hand.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and
Yeah.
there's nothing like that old newsprint smell too of those.
Oh, yeah.
old comics.
Yeah.
And also because you're a novel guy, even the old novels, the smell on those.
Yep. Like I pick up stuff like this.
Oh, nice!
So this one is
What a great illustration on that cover.
yeah. Isn't that, and that's, I love it. Like, so this is 1915, December 9th.
You can almost see someone sketching the person, like.
Yep. Sketched at the front is the title. Like it, and it only costs 6 pence.
That's a big amount.
I love variant. I love foreign price variants and stuff. They're so
Yeah.
cool.
Well, there's no variant of that, I don't think, but but
That's it. Yeah, that was just it. Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
But it's a cool hobby, and I get to hang out with people like you folks, you fellas, and the people in the chat, and it's just is fun. And there's so much common ground. We can have all kinds of differences, and we can disagree, and we can hassle each other about which company is better and which heroes.
I was going to say, you could even hang out with some DC fans and not get too
You
bent
can.
out of shape
And
about it.
and you know, and still hold my head up. And like this is united by fandom. I believe that, right?
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
Well, and
Like-
that's the thing, and that's something that everyone always colors their past with rose-colored glasses, even though it had its issues too. But the cool thing about today is, and you touched on it. I mean, I have friends in Australia now. I have friends in Austria now. I have friends in England. I have friends all over the place. Like people I legit call friends. Like
Mhm.
people that
Yeah.
have something shows up on my doorstep and it's from
Yep.
some place I've never visited, and
Yeah.
I pick up the phone, give them a call, have a regular conversation with them about what's going on, and you know,
Yeah. It is.
you couldn't do that back then, right? Or
No.
even find something that you
Yeah.
want, nostalgia. It was just gone.
It was like
Yeah.
to find a piece. Like, I don't know how Tina does it. She finds stuff
No, amazing.
amazing. She, like, I don't know how she does it. And she says, "Oh, I just get lucky," and I look. I still don't believe that. But
Right?
you know,
That's a PC answer, Tina.
yes, it is. But and then like I scream it to the rooftops. Like, Beyond the Black Hole #4 was one of those books I was looking for. Hard to find Whitman. Tina heard me talking about it, and then a couple of weeks later, one shows up in the mail. And it's just, it is not true. And
She's got a bit of magic about her.
yeah, but that's what this community does, and it blows people away when you tell them that.
Yeah.
But it's a cool thing. It makes you feel good to do it. Like,
Right.
like
No,
Yeah.
I understand that. I mean, a package came today from England, and my wife's like, "What? Who? Where? Why do you have this package
Yeah.
from England?" And I'm like, I know a guy. I know a guy. I made a comment. Actually, it was on Instagram. I made a comment on Instagram because he was, doing rips of people open up packs of like baseball cards and stuff. Well,
Yep.
I'm a
Yeah.
soccer guy, and he was opening up a Premier League pack, and I was like, dude, I can't find those anywhere. Where did you find them? And then I realized, wait a minute, he's in England. He can get them. It's like being at the 7-Eleven and getting it for him,
Right.
So I was like,
Yeah.
man, I can't wait for those to get over here. And he's like, I got you. Just give me your address. And I was like, what? He's like, I'll send you some. And I was like, sweet. But my wife was like, where does this stuff come from? And I'm like, people are nice. And if you're nice to people, people are nice to you, and you do things. It feels good.
And that's what this community is about, I think. Like,
Yes.
and we can argue about stuff, and we can, as I said,
It's all good natured, though. I mean,
Right.
yeah, it is.
Well, that's
it
the
really
thing
is.
too.
We
You've
don't mean
heard-
any kind of ill will about it. It's really because
No.
we like each other, and so we rib each other sometimes about that.
And it's the neighborhood bar,
Absolutely.
right? This is where
Right.
you're hanging out. This is the online cheers. This is where all your friends know your name.
Yeah.
You're hanging out, and
Yep. Yeah, and it's, as you said, Joe. Like you were down. Like some guy said, "Hey, Joe," and you didn't have a clue who he was, but he saw you on one of these.
So
And I saw Comic Tom at Toronto, and I said, "Hey, how are you? I love your show and stuff." And he said, we had a chat, and he goes, "What's your name?" And I told him, and he goes, "Oh yeah," and I said Reggie, and oh yeah, it's this community kind of thing. It just, I don't know, it's pretty neat. It's
unique.
It is very unique, and it is. I can't. It's just. I mean, there's so many things that we could be doing that could be so horrible and destructive, and we're not.
that's what I tell my wife all the time.
Yeah.
And like right now, we're all sitting on a panel, and we would have never ever met each other in any other circumstance ever.
No. Like, why in God's name would you guys even consider talking to some old crazy person up in Northern Ontario? Like.
I've been to Canada quite a bit because I used to live an hour away from the border. But Montreal, when I was in Plattsburgh, New York.
Yep.
I've never once had a bad time in Canada. I've always had the best time.
Well, we try. Just, you know, as long as you don't make a comment about a hockey team in the wrong arena.
Well, I'm a big hockey guy. I used to, it's funny. I used to go to the old forum all the time, but it was for concerts, and I never saw the Habs play there.
Oh, you didn't?
No, I wanted to, but I never got to see the Habs in the forum.
Well, yeah, like, you know, the Toronto Maple Leaf Gardens was like, and then
I'm sorry,
guys,
for you guys who don't know who the Habs are, that's the Montreal Canadiens.
After they expanded the league.
Oh yeah, from the original six.
From the original teams, I still went to some Rangers games, but it got just too much for me. You know?
Well, and
it was nicer when it was just like 8 teams, you know, and that was it. You know.
Well, yeah, because the rivalries were amazing.
They played everybody like every other week. I'd go to the Madison Square Garden, we'd playing the same thing, you know.
Yep.
And
Joe's got a second knock against
them. 2 Canadian teams too.
Yeah.
Right.
Toronto,
that was
Montreal. Toronto,
Joe,
Montreal. Like I remember when
you're a DC fan, but you're also a Rangers fan. I don't know if I can have you back on the channel.
The fact that you live in New York and you're a New Jersey Devils fan is something that I didn't want to mention, but it just like blows my mind. Just blows.
Yeah,
my mind.
that is kind of weird. But I like so I remember when the Leafs won the Stanley Cup. So just
with Bill Barocco.
Well, Dave Keon was the captain.
I know. I was going really old. Yeah.
You were going really old, but you know, and you know,
they got a good team again too, Mark.
Oh, but they have, I don't know. Anyway, we could be here another 4 hours if we start going down this path.
I'm not deep into hockey. Yeah,
no,
I'm not deep into hockey.
But I grew up on Hockey Night in Canada, Mark.
Yeah, same
so I was
here.
watching Don Cherry and Ron McLean and all his crazy suits and all the commentaries. Him always bragging about Doug Gilmour, who I hated until he became a Devil. Then I was okay with him during that period.
Well, same thing with Phil Esposito. He came over and he finally got us a championship for the Rangers.
Yeah. Esposito brothers, the Mahovlich brothers. Oh well, someday maybe.
All right. Well, guys, it has been an absolutely spectacular show. It's been great. First of all, I want to thank the audience who showed up and watched us. It was a blast just learning more about Mark, someone I've been talking to and became closer friends with, but just I've been to the Devils a lot of times. I was behind Marty when he got his 100 shutout. I was 13 rows behind him. That's what you get, Philly. But guys, I want to thank my co-hosts Joe and Matt Woods, who got part of the storm. I was evidently getting nuts messing with the internet. Mm-hmm. And Digger Jim, thank you, and thanks guys I apologize for my internet going kablooey for a few minutes.
They did. We only talked about you a little bit, and they did awesome while we were waiting for you to come back.
Nice, thank you. I'll take it. But Mark, thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing your stories with us and letting us see a little bit behind the collector. It was an amazing show to have you on, and we went long for you. And and I could honestly sit here for another hour or two and talk, but I got to get Joe to bed.
Yep, it's getting late.
Right. Sun's going down
until midnight every night, guys.
I know. But you started this on your show, so we got to continue the tradition.
Yeah.
But guys, thank you so much. It was a great show. I really appreciate you all coming on. Appreciate everyone in the audience. And for those of you watching on the rewind, please go sub up everybody. I have their links in the comments. Mark's only on Instagram, but you can find him pushing his way in forcefully on a lot of our shows, and he will be there for you. But guys, as I like to end this, until next time, keep it casual.